Welcome to the Soul Grit Podcast. I'm Ann Taylor McNeese, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I also love Jesus, and I'm passionate about all things gospel and therapy. I created Soul Grit to be at the intersection of mental health and Christian faith. Christ followers need a place to ask questions and get answers about mental health. Join me as we dive into real stories and real questions from people who want to honor God with their hearts, souls, and minds. Hi, welcome back to the Soul Grit Podcast. This is Anne, and I'm here today with Anjuli Paschall. Hi, Anjuli. It's good to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me on your show today.
Yeah, we were just talking about we're practically neighbors. So Anjali's in the San Diego area, and I'm just north of there. And so we are going through a big heat wave right now and just trying to stay in the air conditioning. So
It's so intense. It's so intense.
yeah, we're waiting. We're waiting. Hopefully next week it will break. Probably by the time this actually airs, then we will not be in a heat wave anymore. But for right now, just for you audience, know that we're sweating while we're talking
Yes,
here.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Down my back. It's great. Lovely.
We're here to talk about Anjali's new book, which is called Feel, a collection of liturgies offering hope for every complicated emotion. And what I really appreciate about that is Anjali comes from a ministry background. Your husband's a pastor, I believe, and you guys have done a lot of ministry together. And so coming from a Christian perspective, you're talking about our feelings, where I come from the other perspective where I'm the therapist and I'm talking about feelings. That's my bread and butter, we're talking about this all the time. So it is refreshing to have somebody want to talk about this from the just a ministry perspective or like a faith building perspective. So before we get into the book, which I know people will be eager to hear about, let's talk just a little bit about you. Like, tell us about yourself. How'd you get to where you are? All of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm from San Diego. I married my husband about almost 20 years ago. We have 5 kids and we grew up together. So I always have known him, but didn't notice him. I'll say that until we were actually going to seminary together. It was probably in seminary when I hit I would call it just like a rock bottom, where growing up in a Christian home from parents who were missionaries, grandparents who were missionaries, I had all the right answers, but my experience internally was so chaotic that I'm sitting in seminary class thinking to myself, do I even believe all this?
Mm.
Is this like, I know, right? God loves me, but why do I like have so much self-hate? It just didn't line up. And so that became for me the beginning of a journey actually um, to really discovering the love of God, not just in my head, but in my heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so from seminary, having kid after kid after kid after kid after kid, I began to just write, mainly on the platform of social media, which became a little hub of other moms and women who kind of have been in the same place I've been of, I know all the right things, but why do I feel like I'm dying inside? And just trying to create a space for honesty and inviting women to tell the truth. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of my time with my kids. I spent a lot of time writing. And actually, my husband and I just launched a retreat ministry next door to us. So we are busy, but it's the best kind of busy.
Yeah. I was looking on your website. We're getting ready for this interview, and I was like, "Ooh, a retreat!" And it looks like you're doing some discipleship as well, like a longer format. So that's really exciting. Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah,
I
that's
do. I
awesome.
do love some retreats. Um, so I want to just point out too that you're talking right now about using social media and you're writing to kind of reach other moms and women, but I just want to say this because there are some male listeners that we're not just having a conversation for women right now because
Yeah.
boys have feelings too,
Yeah.
right? And I don't feel like there's anything about this book that would count our brothers out, right?
No, I hope not.
Yeah. So this is a conversation for everyone. And in fact, I really felt like when I started reading through the new book that I love it for my teenage daughter. And
Yes.
so maybe because you have written from the perspective of a mom, tell us about how like raising kids who have emotions that are different from you, how has that kind of informed your work here?
You know, maybe kind of just an overview of the book.
Mhm.
Um, I've taken 75 of what I consider the most common feelings, or maybe the feelings that I experience the most. There's just hundreds of different names for feelings, but I
Yeah.
picked 75 and I broke it down into little tiny chapters where each feeling has a chapter. And within that chapter, I try my best to give words for the feeling.
Hmm.
So for agitation, say, that's different than frustration and different than annoyance. And so for agitation, it's like I kind of share a little bit like out of what would be a journal of mine of what agitation feels like. And as moms, we all feel agitated, but also I think it's part of human life, male, female, young and old. So I go through a language of the feeling, and then I actually write a liturgy for that feeling as a way to help people open up their hearts to God with what they feel. So it really becomes a great resource book. And I think when you bring up children, I I think about what I wish I would have had when I was 13, 14, 16, 17. And even though it can be for all ages, I think it's a great introductory for young people to really start to name what they feel. And it's so powerful, right? In your line of work, just the power of
Yeah.
naming.
Yeah. Yeah, because I get a lot of adult clients that come in for counseling and they don't have what I call an emotional vocabulary. So
Yeah.
you're saying you have 75, which is like that's ambitious, right? 75 different emotions that you describe and provide a prayer for and a verse for and the liturgy, as you say. Okay, well, 75 is uh, an ambitious number of feelings words, but there are so many more.
Yeah.
And yet I get people, adults that come in and they know like four. They
Yeah.
know, like mad, sad, glad, scared,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And that's a good like starting point. But within sad, can you be a little more descriptive? Or within scared, can you be more descriptive? And so part of my job with certain clients is just teaching them the vocabulary
Yeah.
to understand what they're feeling and be able to identify it and express it.
Yeah, I think one thing that really was so helpful for me, if you look at fear, right, the nuances between the different kinds of fear that you experience, like, right, there's a difference between worry and nervousness.
Right.
So, worry is the fear of a bad thing happening, and nervousness is the fear of a good thing not happening.
Hmm.
And it's just like as you start to name it, it actually allows you to gosh, have more clarity with your internal world instead of like uh fighting ghosts in the dark. It's like, oh, okay, I really want this thing. Like I really want our house to get our offer to get picked. Like I
Mm.
really want that. And it
Yeah.
helps you identify, oh, your desires. And then
Yeah.
actually in fear, you don't have to get so dragged down and so lost and so confused and so just imprisoned by that fear. But it's like, oh, it actually helps you start saying, like, oh, I really hope I get into that college.
Hmm.
I really want this good thing to happen in my life.
Hmm.
And it allows you to actually have steps forward, kind of like a flashlight
Yeah.
versus like banging your head against a door in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see that also like when I work with couples or with a parent-child relationship, like being able to say, this is why my behavior's been like this, or this
Yeah.
is why I've been talking to you like this because I have this emotion or this feeling inside me that I haven't known how to express to you. Right? So putting language around that, I feel like that's one of my jobs is to help
Yeah.
people give language. And so you've entered into this world as well of like just giving people language that they can use to understand what the emotion is and then express it.
Yes.
And sometimes that's just expressing it to God or just expressing it in your journal. It doesn't have to be, not every emotion has to be shared with somebody else, right?
Yes. Well, and it's also it just provides a pathway forward. So often we just get stuck, right? When anxiety comes, we just get stuck. When disgust or resistance or dread pops up in our soul, we get stuck in it. And we I find that there's a few different temptations that we have when we get stuck or we have an uncomfortable feeling, which is probably every day. Every day you have a feeling you don't
Yeah.
like. And the temptations of power, right? I'm going to control this feeling. And typically that looks like we think it. If I just think this feeling enough, it'll go away.
Hmm.
If I just look at it like a Rubik's Cube or a math problem, then I can resolve it.
Yeah.
The other one
Analyze it.
yeah, analyze it to death from every angle. How many of us have done that at 2 a.m.? You know, it's just like, oh, I'm gonna figure it out. And then I won't feel so miserable. And we do a lot of that work on our own in privacy. And it's a really lonely and hard experience. I would say the other temptation with our feelings when we get stuck in a complicated one is powerlessness.
Hmm.
So we lose all of our agency. So
Hmm.
we succumb to the feeling that we feel, and we kind of throw up our hands and say, "There's no way forward. I'm just gonna drown in this."
Yeah.
And then the other one I've noticed is kind of a dismissal or minimizing
Mm.
of the emotion of like, "Oh, it's not that bad. People have it worse. I shouldn't feel this way. Get over it." And we just really, really, really silence that feeling and we push it in the corner. And it looks like being very busy. We're
Hmm.
very good at this in our culture.
Yeah.
Just busybody, very on to the next thing, and we don't honor that feeling.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of the temptations I noticed as I was writing of like, oh wow, we have really poor tools to
Mm.
actually help us embrace what feelings are really there for
Hmm.
and the purpose of them.
Yeah. I would definitely say being like a trauma therapist. I work with a lot of people that really bad stuff has happened to, and all of us have had something bad that's happened to us, right? But sometimes people get stuck in that trauma response, and that's why they need to come to therapy. But one thing that I notice a lot is that dismissiveness or the minimization that you're saying, like the idea of like, what's wrong with me that I can't handle this because other people have had much worse things happen to them.
Oh, yeah, so common, right? I bet you hear that frequently.
Yeah. And so part of my job is like helping people realize like the thing that happened to you had an effect on you and pretending that it didn't or shaming yourself for not handling it well is not going to get you through it. It's just going to keep you stuck. So let's just acknowledge that it did happen, that it was bad, it was terrible, and that God still is going to walk with you and there's a way forward. Now we can
Yes.
acknowledge that.
Yes. Right? Then it becomes like a light on the path.
Yeah. And also the other one that you mentioned about powerlessness, I think like I practice EMDR
Yeah.
form of therapy where one of the key components is to understand what's that negative belief that you have internalized. We call it a negative cognition. So it's something like a deeply held belief that's self-referential, meaning it's a I statement about your place in the world. So this statement that you've believed that I am powerless to change my situation or I was powerless in that situation, um, that becomes kind of part of your core beliefs about yourself and the world. And through EMDR, we try to change that to be a more positive I have power over, or I can trust people to, or I can trust God to keep me safe, like something that's more positive. And so it's not even just the feeling, it's like it's so deep because the feeling was there and it created like this deep core belief that is very hard to shake without some outside help. Yeah.
Yes. And I think even tools like EMDR or therapy, or gosh, sometimes it's just going to your doctor and just saying, I need help.
Yeah.
Like, wow, that's you evoking your agency and your power.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't resolve it immediately, it's like, there is something here for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and we know that sometimes God does healings like miraculously in the moment, and sometimes He heals through a process of bringing other people into your life, or medicine, or therapies, or different things, and that can take longer than you want it to, but that's no
Yeah.
less a miracle that God is providing for you.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So one thing I wanted to also mention about the book is the cover is really cool. Did you, just to describe it for people who aren't looking at it right now, there's a bunch of line sketches of different faces of the different emotions that we're talking about. So, did you draw these or did you
Oh
have?
my gosh. No, I didn't draw them.
Okay.
I, I can't really draw much further than like a stick figure.
Okay.
From the outset of this book, I really wanted illustrations
Mhm.
that could mimic the emotion that people feel. What we would normally look at are emojis, right? When we
Yeah.
text somebody, or if you go into your doctor's office, sometimes there's like a feeling chart, but they're always like cartoonish
Yeah.
figures that look like, I don't know, 8-year-old boys kind of.
Yeah.
And I was like, I really want pictures even of women where it's like, yeah, like when you don't know actually how you feel, you can see a picture and be like, oh yeah, I feel awkward.
Mm.
Oh yeah, I feel shy. And so I had an artist, actually local to me, um, put together 25 different illustrations where she did a phenomenal job just
Yeah.
capturing the feeling in your face.
Yeah. So I just wanted to mention that not only because I'm interested in art, but also because um it's so helpful because we're talking about sometimes you don't have the words. And so for you to be able to look at like a reflection of that face, and then, like maybe you're making that face because you're feeling that thing, and then you get to see that in the illustration, and it kind of helps narrow down like, okay, what is it that's going on here? So that's really
And
helpful.
it's so powerful too, because feelings, it's beyond, it's like every age, every culture, every male, female, that the actual face of a feeling across culture and language
Mhm.
and time actually looks the same,
Yeah. Yeah,
which is
that's so
so
interesting. Huh?
yeah, so interesting to me.
Uh-huh. Well, it makes you think like that's part of the image of God, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
One-
talk to us about, I'm sure you had to think through this, like God or his son Jesus being a person with emotions.
yeah. Well, it's so fascinating to me because, I think we and you, I'm sure, have bumped up against the tension between church and mental health, or church and psychology, or church and getting help outside of, being referred not just to a pastor but to a therapist. And I think that when you think about feelings, if you look at scripture, it's just covered with feelings.
Mhm.
And so the denial of feelings, or the suspicion of feelings, or the minimization of feelings, it's actually not biblical.
Mhm.
And so biblically, you look at the whole book of Psalms and it's all a prayer
Mhm.
from David's feelings, and they're crazy prayers. It's like, out of rage, God, would you murder these people?
Mhm.
And out of the depths of sorrow, there is no one here to help me. It's biblical to pray your feelings. And then, like you said, when you think about Jesus, who was angry, who wept, who had compassion, who needed rest, who got tired.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, and everyone who had an interaction with God and Jesus, it was alongside and with their feeling. So Mary in surprise, and Martha and her worry, and Peter in his doubt. You go back, Moses and his anxiety. It's everywhere. And so to say that as believers, we have to separate heart from head or feelings from thinking, it's just unbiblical.
Mm-hmm.
It's we are humans and we are integrated entirely. And actually we think from our hearts. And so we're coming a long way, I think, in embracing and allowing and encouraging people to actually feel what they feel. But I think there's still some work to be done in the church with that.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking about like if the church opts out of talking about our feelings or our mental health or any of these topics, like somebody else is going to fill that vacuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of like the same thing, like if you don't have a sex talk with your kids, somebody's going to
No one
have a
will.
sex talk with your
Yeah.
kids, and it's not going to be what you want them to know, right? So, like if we don't talk about emotions or mental health, then we're going to get this kind of skewed idea about it from the world. And
Yeah.
so there's really like a place for people like you and I to speak up um, about these concepts and teach Christian people who are faithful to following Jesus how to do this in a way that continues to be honoring to God and obedient and but still honest with how God made us, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yes. I feel like we're taking steps in that direction. Like I see really beautiful movements in what is being written and what's being talked about from the pulpit and what I see online. Um, but I think it's important, even in our homes, like with our families. I think that's a huge place where it starts to invite our children to feel what they feel,
Yeah.
and for as parents to not be afraid of it.
Yeah. So, Anjali, how old are your kids?
17, 15, 12, 10, and 7.
Okay. So you're fully in the teenage years right now.
We're there.
Yeah. And you have boys and girls, right?
Yeah, 2 boys, then 3 girls.
Okay. So talk to us a little bit about what has that been like to walk with teenagers through teaching them this?
Yeah. Well, you kind of have to be covert, right?
Yeah. Right.
You can't be obvious, as I've learned. And now that I have this book out, next time I bring up feelings, they're like, Mom, you know. But I would say one of the, how do I put this? One thing that I think has really uh, been helpful for me in all ages of parenting, even young ones to almost having an adult, is the more I embrace my feelings, it gives me space for my children to have their feelings. So, for instance, if I'm angry and I'm not dealing with it and I'm stuffing it, the second my, mid puberty daughter is screaming or angry, um, because I've been able to process my anger, I have space in my heart for her to have her anger.
Mm,
If I'm dismissing my anger, guess what I'm going to do to her anger?
right.
Get over it.
Yeah.
Just get over it. It's not that big a deal. Stop.
Yeah.
People
I
have it
have
worse.
I have it together. You need to pull yourself together.
Yeah. Right. And so I think a lot happens. Honestly, it starts with the parent, it starts with the dad, it starts with the mom being able to integrate their feelings into their regular daily life.
Mhm.
And what trickles down is how it's modeled.
Mhm.
Then your kids see, like, oh, mom really got angry, but then this is what she did with that.
Yeah.
Like, she took some space,
Hmm.
She came back and apologized.
Hmm.
She like allowed herself to have that emotion.
Yeah.
Oh, I can do that too.
Yeah.
I don't have to be scared of that.
What have you noticed in your marriage since you've been working on this?
Uh, it's a great question. Um, well, I think the biggest thing in our marriage, um, I don't know, I guess the best terms to describe this is Enneagram numbers. I'm sorry, I know that might be an overused resource,
Yeah, I love it.
but
I'm a
yeah,
three, so
yeah, me too. And my husband's a nine.
oh, same. We have that
Yeah,
same dynamic.
it's a great dynamic. I love my nine husband. He's the best. So peaceful.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it has been for him and of me asking him to be like bring out his anger,
Mm,
as he very much pushes it down and
yeah.
suppresses it
Yeah.
for the sake of peace and not wanting conflict. And I'm pretty quick to anger. I don't, it's just right there. I can't really help it.
Mm,
And so it's a really interesting place of growth for us of like, it sounds weird, but actually having more conflict. And that's actually been good for us of, oh, no, tell me what you really feel. Like, you don't have to keep the peace for me.
yeah.
Like, I'd rather you tell me the truth than just push that down.
Mm, hmm.
But it's been really helpful, actually.
Yeah. The conflict comes more frequently because you're dealing with things in the moment versus stuffing, bottling, and then exploding later when all this
Yeah.
resentment has built, right?
Yeah. It wildly feels more healthy than it's ever felt before, even though we're having longer, harder conversations than we've ever had.
Mm, yeah. That's a tough season, but it sounds like it's going to be really rewarding.
Yeah.
Getting
And I
to,
also, it's transformative because, right, you think about anybody in your life, if you look backwards, right, who you have an intimate relationship with. It is because at one moment you shared vulnerably something you were feeling,
mm,
be it crying on the bathroom floor, being they were there when you were just slamming the door again or punching a hole in the wall,
mm,
or just sat with you in silence. Like those are the people who are your people. And the way that formed was because you let them into how you felt.
hmm,
You let them see you in your mess.
hmm,
And that is like the most powerful relationship you can have with someone.
hmm.
And I think that transfers onto God as well.
Yeah.
That God can handle your anger, God can handle your um, anxiety, God can handle your fear
Hmm.
and your rage
Hmm.
and your depression. And so there's power in vulnerably sharing your feelings. And what it can so lead to is intimate relationship.
Hmm. Yeah. I once heard somebody at I was still in college and then we went to some kind of like conference and there was like a dating seminar or something because, all the college kids want to be at
Yeah.
that. And I remember this wise leader said that if you have no conflict in the relationship, either you're not going very deep or somebody's eating dirt. And because from having this kind of dynamic of the three and the nine in the relationship, if somebody's going to eat dirt, it's going to be the nine, right?
Yeah.
It's not going to be
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And so if you're not having any conflict, then it's a good chance that somebody like you or me is just kind of domineering, overrunning the whole situation.
Yeah.
And so if there is conflict, that means that both of the people are allowed to come to the table, right?
Yeah. I love that so much. Yes.
Yeah, that's hard. Okay. Well, talk to me about how you see people using this book. It's not like a read it cover to cover kind of book. So,
No.
how are you envisioning your readers really getting into it and appreciating it?
Yeah. You're right. It's not something you would read front to back. Um, I would imagine that people would pick it up in two different ways. One is a rhythm of life.
Mm.
Even for me, I pick it up actually every morning and ask myself, how do I feel?
Oh.
And then I open up, I look at the table of contents, find how I feel. Yesterday actually was confused. So then I open up to confused and I just spent some time praying and reading and opening up my heart to God with the confusion that I feel.
Mhm.
The other way I imagine people picking it up is when they're in a place of kind of internal conflict where they feel stuck and don't know what to do. And so the book becomes a resource.
Mm.
Like, oh gosh, I couldn't sleep last night because I had so much jealousy in my heart.
No.
So, okay, let me look up jealousy. Let me give some words to why I might be feeling the way I do. And let me open my heart to God with that and the reality and the truth of where my heart is. I guess there is one more way I imagine people using as a resource is to love other people. How
Mm.
many times have you walked with someone and you're like, I don't know what to say? Gosh, they are so exhausted. And I
Mm.
don't want to just say, I'm praying for you, you
Yeah.
know? And here's like a book that you can either give to them or you can look up exhausted. And right there's some words that you can offer your friend or a
Sure.
prayer you can offer your
Yeah.
friend or a verse.
Yeah. Do you mind it? And maybe you might tell me it's not okay with your publisher, but can we read a little bit of it?
Yes, I sadly
I
I
have
don't have
it.
it. Okay, yeah,
I have
go
it.
for it.
Yes, I have it right in my lap.
I would love that.
And okay, so since you just mentioned the exhausted one,
Yeah,
I
who's
want
feeling
to.
exhausted?
I happen to have opened to that page. Okay,
Turns out,
you're defining exhausted as a deep tiredness that fuels anger. That's such an interesting definition.
isn't it?
Yes, because I never think about the like exhaustion being like the fuel for anger, but that's true that when you're really exhausted, you're going to be like snappy, you feel like resentful that you don't have time to rest or that you haven't gotten to do the fun thing or whatever it is, you know? So,
I know when I was studying this and doing research for it, it was like, wow. I think it's just surprising. It surprised me that exhaustion was under the anger category, but it very much is.
hmm, yeah, that's interesting to me. Okay, so in each chapter, you're giving the definition and then you're giving kind of like an example of what that might look like in your life, a little couple of paragraphs about that. But let me read the liturgy. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah.
This says a liturgy for when I feel exhausted. It says breathe in, Jesus, good shepherd. Breathe out. May I find my rest in you. So this is a breath prayer to get you started. I feel exhausted. I feel it in my body. I open my heart to you, God. Reveal to me when in my story I have felt this way before. God, I am not here by accident. I am not here by my own misfortune. I am here because in your will you have allowed it. I accept that I am powerless to save myself from my circumstances. I also accept that I am not without power, for my power, my strength, and my hope come from you. I return to you now for help. I've been so overwhelmed that it has brought me to a state of exhaustion. I am nearing a breaking point. Everything seems to weigh me down, even small tasks. I've been asked to do things beyond my limits. I feel like I am holding on to a branch that is about ready to snap. I have so many burdens on my back. I have to climb up and out. I am failing. I am afraid that things will never change. Pressure presses down on me from every side. I don't want to explode. I don't want to be resentful. I don't want to displace my anger onto people who don't deserve it. It is hard not to become bitter, rude, or mean. God help me. God help me pass through anger and resentment without using them as weapons to gain power. God help me turn toward you with the impossible position I am in. God, help me believe in the good of the journey I am on. The good is for others in my care. The good is for the spreading of the gospel. The good is for the healing of my own pain. God, help me endure because I can't do it on my own anymore. I can't carry this cross alone. It is harder than I imagined. It is hard to not harbor anger. It is hard to forgive. It is hard to let go. It's hard to relax. It is hard to surrender. It is hard to believe that you care about my life more than I do. As I dangle from this branch, help me see that you are the tree I dangle from. Your arms endured that lashing, whipping, and slashing of intense suffering. Your arms fed the 5,000s. Your arms served the disciples. Your arms became a resting place for those in need of rescue. You understand exhaustion too. You took space to be with your Father when your soul and body were weary. May I learn from you how to rest in God's love. If it would be your will, please deliver me from this pain because it is so hard to bear. If my circumstances do not change, may your grace be enough to sustain me. I pray it would be. One moment at a time. What you have entrusted to me, I entrust back to you. I give you my life. Even as weary as I am, may my life be an offering to you. Lord, hear my prayer. Wow, Anjali, that is beautiful and hard and gut-wrenching.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I want you to read all of these. Are you
I,
doing
oh
are
my
you doing an
gosh.
audio?
An audio is coming out. I didn't get to do the recording,
Oh,
but
okay.
I'm so grateful that people can have it in their ears when they need
Yes.
it.
Yes. Some people need these words spoken out loud over them.
Yeah, yeah.
And in fact, I think I might take this to my office so I can do that for people when they're in
Oh,
their counseling session.
that'd be so awesome.
Yeah. Which one of these was the hardest for you to write?
Oh, anxiety was really hard.
Oh,
Um, and actually, disgust was hard. Disgust is such a crazy emotion
yeah.
because at the onset, most people don't wouldn't say they experience disgust.
Mm,
But the more you get into it, it's like, oh, we'd experience disgust all the time.
yeah.
Dread, resistance, being misunderstood. Um, uh, actually, I don't, is resentful in that one? I can't remember off the cuff.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, disgust is such an active feeling that we feel, but it's so undernamed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the discussed ones were for me and my own exploration of like, oh yeah, how do I feel that? Like, how do I experience that in my body? Oh my gosh, I experience that all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
resist everything. I don't want to do anything. And it's just an uncomfortable feeling to feel. And so writing those were challenging. I really enjoyed writing. One of my favorite ones was playful.
Oh,
Happiness is also it's an interesting emotion because a lot of people have a hard time with happiness. You
yeah.
think, right? You think, oh,
Yeah.
this will be easy. Like, of course, happiness.
Yeah.
Amazed. Oh, what a great feeling. But it almost always coincides with anxiety. The
Oh, that
fear of the happy feeling ending.
ending. Yeah.
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 And
Or
so, yeah,
what I hear a lot of times, like, I'm happy now, but the other shoe's gonna drop.
yeah. Or I don't deserve it, right? Oh, I can't be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so it's like so much of the happiness liturgies um, are an invitation for you to to savor the gift that you have this moment
Yeah.
and to allow yourself to even with playful it's like so often we think we have to earn play
Mm-hmm.
like oh if I do all the good girl good boy things first
Mm-hmm.
then I can play right many of us it was like if you do your chores and your homework then you can watch TV. And so we just translate that into life.
Yeah.
And the way God created us was like, no, play is life.
Mm.
All of life is play. And it was just a delightful one to write. It was
Yeah.
just so joy filled.
Yeah. When I was thinking through it, I was thinking when you have a really uncomfortable emotion, like one of those, like I don't like to say any emotion is negative or positive, but the ones that feel very unpleasant.
Sure.
Um, there are some where you might be like, oh, okay, I need to journal or I need to talk through this with someone. And that might be a moment where I would pick up a book like this and be like, okay, let me
Yeah,
process through this. But sometimes when it's just those really like flashy emotions, like the big anger, you might just kind of feel in your spirit, I'm not picking up the stupid book,
sure.
right? And
Sure.
then you might have to go through a process before you can even get here. And the same with those really pleasant emotions, like the joyful, excited feelings. Like you don't want to stop and like read the thing in the chapter. But I think this goes towards what we talk about on this podcast all the time, that we have like a daily responsibility towards soul care, like
Yeah.
caring for our souls. And being able to pause and appreciate and talk to God about it and pray through it, like that's part of the soul care, whether it's a happy emotion or a disgust emotion or whatever it is.
Yeah. And that's where I think the practice and the rhythm and even discipline of reading in the morning. Because
Mm,
a lot of, at least for me as a mom, it's like I don't want to like be a jerk to my kids. I don't want to be mean,
yeah.
but I can very easily be mean any given moment.
Mm,
And in the heat of that moment, you're right. It's not like, now I'm going to go to my closet and pray. We don't really do that. There's something about um, these, like it's an anger that sometimes does need to come out.
mhm,
But if we're most of the time in reflection of anger, especially towards our children, it's like, dang it,
mhm.
why did I do that?
Yeah.
And so the daily practice of like, and we can move on, we can just move on.
Yeah.
But something in your soul needs care.
Yeah.
And that's really what feelings are. Feelings are really just like, hey, your own little person in there saying, I need help. I need care.
Yeah. Pay
Like
attention.
something's not right in here. And
Mhm.
so even if you were angry at your kids yesterday, instead of just moving on and being like, I'll do better tomorrow, it's like, okay, God, something in my soul is unwell.
Mm.
And I want to attend to it and I want you to attend to it too.
Mhm. Do you do the practice of a daily examine? That part of your,
I I don't, although
but you know what it is, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. So that's like just like taking a few minutes in the evening to kind of go through with God, like, what did I feel today? What did I hope today? What did I fear today? Where did I notice God in my life? Where did I feel absent from Him? And so I can imagine that. And maybe I'm just personalizing this because I tend to have my Bible time in the evening.
Uh-huh.
It started when my kids were really little and they were the
Yeah.
kind of kids that wanted to be up. Like if you set foot out of the bed, they were awake,
Of course.
And so
Hello, good
there was
morning.
no time to do the like let's have time with Jesus in the morning. And so but I had a strict bedtime for them. So I'd always put them to bed at 8 o'clock and that would be the time that I would have my quiet time. And
That's
so
awesome.
even though they're bigger now and they stay up way too late, like I still want to have that evening time with God just because it became the habit. And that is a place where you can incorporate that daily examine. And then I can imagine saying, okay, what emotion stuck out to me during this day? And then can I read a liturgy that goes along with it?
Yeah. Yeah. That would be such a great practice.
Yeah. So actually, just real quick, because a lot of the people that listen to this are from evangelical backgrounds, and like liturgy has been less of a vocabulary word in our practice. Why did you choose to use that word to describe the practice that you're setting out here?
Yeah. Well, liturgy is like a long history word in the church.
Mhm.
Um, there is a sacredness to it, especially if you read liturgies or have read liturgies in church. There's a unison to it, a voice.
Mhm.
And so I think, right, a lot of times prayer and liturgies can be interchangeable. But I love this idea of a liturgy holding fast and holding true for decades.
Mm.
Like I'm saying some words that early Christian believers were saying.
Mm.
And there's just a unification in that I really liked.
Yeah.
But you can just as well say prayer, and it's truly opening your heart to God and desiring a relationship
Yeah.
with Him.
That's good. I just didn't want that word to be scary to anybody
Yeah.
that might not have that same kind of church background. So,
Yeah. Well, I grew up in an evangelical church too. And so
yeah.
the first, I think it was meeting a friend who was more from a Reformed church where I was like, what is that? And I remember going to his church and stand up, sit down, and I was like, wow, this is different, but there's also something sacred about it.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so before I let you go today, let me ask you, since we've kind of been talking about it a little bit, but let me ask you the question I ask all my guests. What are you doing for soul care?
Oh, that's such a great question. It's a practice I could not do for a long time because when my kids were little, it was just too hard for me. But journaling,
Oh,
and I've really neglected journaling for, oh gosh, 10 years.
yeah.
And now that I'm picking it back up, it's like this is such a powerful practice.
Hmm.
Even if it's one line,
Yeah.
it's just like, oh, okay, grounding my place with Jesus and grounding my place in this room, grounding my place within my own heart. And it's been such a wonderful re-engagement of that practice.
Hmm. Can you coach us a little bit? Like, how do you get into journaling? What's
How
your
did I, or
practice?
how do
Or
I?
like on a daily basis? Like, what does your practice look like?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it's perfect and it's not every day, but I would say probably 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
It's just waking up when I can and really like starting where I am.
Mm.
So it's usually how I feel. And also, it's really trying to attend to um, some young places in me.
Mm.
So sometimes that involves imaginary prayer or my imagination of like, God, where am I?
Mm.
And oftentimes the Lord will show me like a young place where I am, where I'm wrestling. How you kind of mentioned with EMDR, like some of these young lies in us of, oh, like I still feel dumb.
Mm.
And so it's kind of praying from those places of like almost my younger self and attending to that in prayer.
Feeling it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's cool. I just ask you that because I think journaling is very intimidating for most of us.
Oh, yeah.
Mm. And also, I've had some people say that's for girls, and I don't believe it's just for girls. I think there's been amazing male brothers that have written journals. So
Yes.
just to be kind of like transparent and honest about what the practice looks like, that it's not every day, it's not always pages and pages, it's not always like pretty and tied up with a bow. We're not going to
Never
publish
actually.
these. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. How do people find out more about you?
Sure. I'm on social media a lot, Instagram mainly. My handle is lovealways.anjuli. And I have a website where I do offer spiritual direction. You can find some courses that I offer there as well. It's anjulipaschall.com.
Okay.
And then you can find my book anywhere books are sold online. So,
Okay. And I will put all those links in the show notes, including the new book, which is called Feel and has that lovely cover. So I hope that people at least look it up and maybe buy that for themselves or as a gift. And it's very beautiful, and it's been wonderful to talk to you today.
oh, thank you so much, Anne.
The Soul Grit podcast is a production of Soul Grit Resources. You can find more at soulgritresources.com or on the socials at Soul Grit Resources. You can email me at info@soulgritresources.com.